Family and fellow soldiers, I'm the Professor, and this is the Moment of Truth. The theme for this week's morning briefings is going to be focusing on ourselves. You've heard of the 48 laws of power? Well, I'm going to give you 4 or 5 laws of weakness. First of all, consuming entertainment without reason. When the Roman Empire degenerated into an unabashed, debauched sewer, one of the ways the Caesars kept the people from going into revolt was bread and circuses. The bread today is junk food, and the circuses are the so-called entertainment and news that the white media produces and pushes upon us. Their entertainment is mostly thinly veiled propaganda meant to teach you racial roles and to reinforce ideology that makes you comply with this system instead of resolving to resist it. How many of you watch streaming TV shows? A lot, if not most of you. Have you ever wondered why the shows you watch are so, quote-unquote, addictive? They even use the word as a tagline in their marketing for their shows. Your new addiction, etc. The white media spends a lot of time and money, and they have put decades into learning how to craft entertainment meant to engage you by mimicking the sophistication of real life. And the people who make this stuff know exactly how valuable it is to the system. That's why you had the writers' strike this summer. The people who come up with this addictive programming and write it, they want their share of the money that it generates. They come up with these story bibles, season-long plot outlines, deep character arcs. These people know exactly what they're doing. And then you have the sports shows, the less said about them the better, and of course the flash and trash content like Love and Hip Hop and Basketball Wives and the Real Housewives of Who Gives a Damn. Oh yeah, they happen to have degeneracy and distractions and circuses for every taste. Even if you think of yourself as highbrow, they got something for you. Television shows may be more sophisticated than they've ever been, but the movies are more juvenile than ever. Everything is whiz-bang, computer-generated imagery at the multiplex. And to think some of you wonder why I don't watch movies or television. Yes, part of it is that I don't see anything that honors and edifies us, but another part of my reason is that I refuse to become addicted to the white media's narratives and images. I limit my contact with their circuses so that I limit their influence on me. When you look at the TV shows they put on, what kind of messages are they teaching? Most of all these TV shows revolve around 3 things: money, sex, and power. That's it. Just an endless loop of people cutting throats to get their hands on money, sleeping with everyone, and doing anything to be in charge. It's all just lowbrow, hindbrain kind of stuff. Themes like honor, loyalty, and compassion simply don't show up on your screen. Everyone is out for themselves, and everyone around them are merely obstacles. There's constant double crosses and betrayals, and it's all justified as long as you get the money in the end and hopefully have sex with a few people, including your enemies. By the way, that is a very dangerous theme of these shows and movies that the white media puts out, that characters are having sex, intimate relations, sharing their bodies with people who they're supposed to be in opposition to. For black people, this is genocidal. As Dr. John Henrik Clarke taught us, sexual politics is a field black people have been willfully ignorant of. Some black people think that if they have sex with someone from the dominant society, that means they've fallen in love with you. But in reality, it's just recreational for them. They've shown over the course of centuries they can have sex with a black person and then immediately get out of bed and order that black person to be killed. There have even been TV shows that have depicted exactly that scenario, but black people never seem to notice. Now, for the sociopaths who run Hollywood, that's just fine with them because, as we've seen in recent years, most of them are degenerates anyway, so they love that kind of reptile brain stuff. When you see Hollywood putting out movies about serial killers, those are actually power fantasies from the studio executives. Those guys who run Hollywood, they identify with the Freddy Kruegers and the Michael Myers. That's the main reason these avatars of evil never die, no matter what people do to them. That's the reason why for 15 years I've told you that the eyes are the windows to the soul, but the window goes both ways. People can see what's going on inside your mind, but you also are letting things into your mind. We have to be very careful not to let the white media indoctrinate us with their value system, because their value system is sick. Our values are better, but we need media and content that honors our values and helps us to reinforce black empowerment, instead of trying to be and do things the way of our oppressors. White supremacy is a group sport, and so is black empowerment. But if we let the white media reinforce that we should all be out for ourselves and not trust other black people, then we will never be able to retake our power, which is exactly what they want. Now, the second form of things that keep you weak are techno gadgets. Before I go any farther, I know some of you had a knee-jerk reaction to that. Let me tell you off top, obviously, I like and use technology. It's enabled us to become connected and to communicate with speed and efficiency and to do it over a widespread area. There is undoubtedly a lot of good things that have come out of technological advancement, but it's also given us some things we didn't ask for. I'm sure I'm not the only one who's noticed that whenever I go anywhere, and I do mean anywhere, wherever there's other people, I see the exact same thing. Everybody's looking down, constantly. Doesn't matter if it's the grocery store, the DMV, their child's piano recital, at home, the hospital, their car, everyone's looking down at their phones. And I think that's the perfect metaphor for what technology has done to people. It's got them with their heads in the sand, not paying attention to what's going on all around them. Yes, technology has given us many blessings, but it's also given us an equal if not greater number of problems too. The reason you know about me is because of technology. It enables voices like mine to bypass the broadcast and print gatekeepers and go directly to you. And I'm glad for that. But one of my fears is that the non-stop tsunami of content that people are inundated with by technology would make them listen to me or other new black media voices and see us as politically oriented entertainment. To them, it's just another form of media, a way to pass the time with content that they find stimulating and engaging, at least for a few minutes. But for a lot of them, it goes no further than that. And when they're done listening to me, it's off to someone else. And when they finish listening to them, they go seek out something else to listen to or to watch. They want to be constantly engaged. And why is that? Because technology and the people behind it have conditioned them to be that way. What is so important that so many people simply must keep their eyes glued to a tiny screen? The algorithms are programmed to offer you more of what you've already watched. That way you never leave YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, or whatever. The digital gadgets of today are basically toys for adults. Most black people realize this, but refuse to use the toy as a tool. And when you look at the vast majority of content online featuring black people, it's all dim-witted and contemptible. And that's what most black people have chosen to consume. Sure, a lot of people may be doing legitimate business, but nobody's doing that constantly all the time. Certainly not all of these people we see. Otherwise, they'd be filthy rich, which most of us are not. This is the cost of our fascination with these digital devices. Entertain us, make us laugh, make us cry, make us feel something, however hollow and brief that may be. Do something to divert us. We are amusing ourselves to death. To say nothing of providing these white-owned tech companies with data on your every whim, caprice, habit, and opinion. Here's a bit of information for you. I don't own a cell phone. I never have. It's not because I'm a Luddite, I'm not. Obviously, I've been online making these video essays for a long time, so technology is not something that I find to be off-putting or intimidating. And sure, there may be a kernel of truth to the accusation that Professor Truth doesn't have a cell phone because he's antisocial. Well, it's also because these tech companies like Apple and Google put GPS monitoring apps on their devices. Even things like the television sets that you buy, these so-called smart TVs, oh, they're smart all right. Smart enough to keep track of the things that you watch and to transmit that data back to the manufacturers of those TVs who then sell it to these so-called data brokers. When people talk about the government or unscrupulous corporations monitoring people, they always think of teams of spies and masked men doing wiretaps and eavesdropping like they see in the movies. But which do you think is more efficient and less likely to be spotted? Masked men sneaking into your home and putting a listening device in there? Or if they can get you to buy a device and spy on yourself? You're carrying a digital tether on you. And not only does it tell these white technocrats what it is that you're focusing on at the moment, it also tells them your every move. It can also help them determine who you're meeting with in the real world, and they can make some pretty educated guesses as to what it is that you're meeting for. We know these companies work hand in hand with the police. The cops routinely have Facebook or Twitter or whomever turn off live streams whenever the cops are going to ambush and kill a black person. The government routinely requests information from these tech companies about certain individuals who use their websites or their apps, and these companies comply the vast majority of the time. These tech companies are basically auxiliaries of the government where black people are concerned. They're simply government entities in all but name, certainly in function. I'm not telling you to abandon your digital devices. I'm not silly enough to think that you would. I'm not. But what I am telling you is you didn't make those devices, and you don't actually know what's in them, and you don't actually know how they function. The people who made them, they're not going to tell you, so you need to start looking at those devices the way that the people who made them look at them. I'm telling you to reduce your time with it. Malcolm said that every time you open a liquor bottle or break the seal on it, that's a government seal you're breaking. And every time you pull out that cell phone, I want you to see it the exact same way. Next thing that keeps you weak is bad food and no exercise. I put both of those together because they're flip sides of the same coin. Nutrition is what keeps us biologically and mentally strong. Exercise is what makes us physically strong. When you eat properly, you think and move better. People who exercise regularly can deal with stress better too. That doesn't mean you should seek out things that aggravate you. You shouldn't. But it does mean that a person whose BMI is out of whack or who hasn't gotten off the couch since Obama was in office is not in good shape, and they're going to be a hell of a lot less useful to themselves or to Black empowerment. Deconditioning is a serious health problem. When you sit too much, when you sleep too much, your metabolism slows down. And in time, simple things like walking a short distance becomes a problem for you. Taking the stairs instead of the elevator becomes daunting. Lifting simple things becomes a workout. The best diet in the world is meaningless if you're not using what you eat to keep you physically strong. Likewise, it's impossible to outwork a crappy diet. If you're eating junk food or just things that have too many calories and too many chemicals in them, then you're reducing how effective your exercise is. In the U.S., we live in a frankenfood garbage heap. A lot of the stuff that gets sold in the U.S. can't even be sold in Europe because of all the genetically modified stuff that's in it and the chemicals. Other countries think the U.S. is insane. And when you look at the obesity rate here and the number of heart attacks, diabetes, and other maladies that are primarily due to a poor diet or food that's more chemicals than anything else, you see that they're right. But there's also another factor at work. Black people are encouraged to have a poor diet, and the basic city works that exist in white areas to encourage exercise are systematically kept out of ours. Food deserts, a lack of parks and recreation areas, or the few we have little facilities or equipment. It's not impossible to change this on the personal level and to basically decide to get around it on your own, but it's more difficult. And a lot of this is by design. Robert Moses intentionally used his position as a New York City government bureaucrat to build bridges deliberately meant to reduce the ability of Black people to move freely about the city. Is anyone so naive as to think that the government officials of today, Robert Moses' successors, are not using their position to do the same things when it comes to public works, and that they don't collaborate with their corporate partners to do the same things with the food that we eat? Nothing happens in a vacuum under white supremacy. If you've been practicing sitting instead of walking, it's time to change that. If you've been avoiding the produce section of the store and heading straight for the aisles, it's time to change that too. And stop it with the excuses that the produce is just too expensive. It's nowhere near as expensive as blood pressure medication, diabetes treatments, and hospital stays. And also, it's time to be honest with ourselves about the claim that you don't have time to devote at least 45 minutes a day to walking or hitting the gym. Black people always have times for things that we want to do, but we make excuses for the things we need to do. Bad food and no exercise will make you unhealthy, and a person who is unhealthy is also a person who is weak. Someone who's big and slow is harmless. A person who's lean and strong is dangerous. Your oppressors know that, and so should you. Speaking of things that keep people weak, drugs are also one of the worst forms of vices that you simply can't afford. Every time I talk about marijuana, I always get inundated with a bunch of angry commenters from people who I never hear from at any other time, and they're always groaning and whining that they don't like it when I tell them that marijuana is a form of enslavement and they need to stop. Malcolm told Black people about liquor back in the day, and they didn't want to hear it then either. It seems every generation we have to keep relearning the same lesson. Listen, if marijuana was really going to empower you, do you think these white supremacists would have legalized it? And even in the places where it's legal, they still arrest primarily Black people for having it, so apparently legal doesn't mean legal where we're concerned. There is no example in all of human history of a group of people being intoxicated or inebriated or getting high and also being powerful too. No example of people getting high and being able to resist an attack either. When the Romans decided that they wanted to get themselves more women for their empire, they went to a place called Sabine. They pretended to befriend the men there, and then one night they got all the men of Sabine sloppy drunk to the point that they all passed out. The Romans then took their male hosts, dragged them outside the city walls, and locked them out. When the Sabine men sobered up and realized what had happened, they gathered some weapons and tried to storm the gates to what had been their city, But when the gates opened, they saw their own women, their sisters, daughters, and even wives come out and tell them not to attack the Romans, that they had agreed to be the Romans' wives. This incident has come to be known in history as the rape of the Sabine women, but it was actually the men who got violated. Another incident was the Opium Wars. The British began flooding China with opium in order to soften the country up for what would be an invasion and colonization. But the Chinese emperor realized what the Brits were up to, and he issued an edict making the possession of opium punishable by death. It was draconian, but it also worked too, because China wasn't colonized. The American Revolution is another incident where intoxication kept an army from being able to fight. Everyone is taught about how General Washington crossed the Delaware, but what most people forget is that he intentionally chose to cross on Christmas Day, December 25th, 1776. And why did he choose that night in particular? Because he knew that the British forces would be busy partying and drinking to celebrate Christmas. And he was right. The British forces got sloppy drunk that night and they had no idea that Washington and his men were sneaking up on them. The very next day, while the British's Hessian mercenaries were recovering from their hangover, Washington and his men attacked, and the Battle of Trenton was the first major military victory by the rebels. It also marked a turning point in the war as Washington and the other slave owners were able to finally go on offense. The British also gave alcohol to the Irish and the Red Indians, and we all know what happened to them. You know, it's a real shame that I have to constantly give a brief history of how invaders and oppressors have used drugs and other intoxicants as tools of conquest and control. But some black folks actually think that drugs set them free, when there is no example in all of human history to support that. And the fact that people will go to such ridiculous lengths to defend something that even they know isn't true just goes to show that drugs have made them morally and mentally weak. People take drugs because they feel trapped or unfulfilled, and the drugs get their mind off of these feelings of helplessness, and that includes things like alcohol, which is a depressant. You're stressed, you want to quote-unquote unwind, so you drink some alcohol or smoke some weed. Problem is, nobody ever drinks or smokes drugs in moderation. Everybody does them to excess because they're trying to make whatever relaxed or mellow state they're in permanent. People who are permanently relaxed are also people who can't free themselves. Another form of drugs are stimulants. Stimulants will give your body energy, but they don't make your mind more powerful. And it's your mind that will set you free. Drugs also cause long-term health problems, assuming you live that long. A lot of drug users die from overdoses, or from drugs that were laced with poison, or some other kind of toxic substance. Look, we got our hands full as it is just trying to make sure the food we eat didn't come out of some lab at Monsanto's. We don't need to complicate things further with stuff that we know is poisonous. And that brings us to the final of our set of things that make you weak, because I think that the worst weakness of all is procrastination. Of all the weaknesses, this one is by far the worst because it's the most common reason people don't get things done at the individual level and the reason too many people are useless to helping bring resources to the table at the group level. Procrastination is the silent killer of hopes, dreams, and your future. You will look up and 30 years will have passed by without your ever having gotten a thing done. The Bible says, a little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to rest, and poverty will come upon you like a robber, and want like an armed man. When the Bible says poverty will come upon you like a robber, that means your laziness will cause you to miss work, or to not be busy getting the money you need to sustain yourself. And you'll look up and see that your possessions have all been sold off to service your debts until eventually you're out on the streets. You can't maintain a lifestyle for free. Be about the business or get used to having less in your life and eventually having nothing at all. And the line about want pouncing on you like an armed man, that means you'll constantly be short the money, and at the times when you can least afford it. If you sit around, you'll be robbing yourself of the opportunities you need. Putting things off until tomorrow inevitably turns into next week, then next month, and then never. A lot of us have projects that we thought about but never actually started, and others that we began but the second it got tough or stopped being fun, we put it down and never returned to it. And that's why so many of us have lives littered with couldas, wouldas, and shouldas. We put things off instead of seeing them through. This is why taking part in watching so much entertainment or digital distractions is so dangerous. We always say that we'll do such and such one of these days, but one of these days is where our goals and objectives go to die. The day never comes, but old age and death always does. There's other things that I could certainly name. I'm sure that you'll list them in the comments, but I hope the point is made. Each of us is a cell in the body politic of Black empowerment. Are you a healthy cell, a strong one, or are you a weak and feeble one? If it's the latter, then you owe it to yourself and to your people to change that. Each of us can begin the process of spreading the message and the code of Black empowerment right where we are. But that starts by putting Black empowerment into practice. People who are distracted, in poor health, or putting it off until tomorrow won't be spreading anything except their lard bottoms on the couch. Success is not guaranteed, no matter what you do, because success is not a choice, though fighting and being persistent puts the odds in your favor. Failure, on the other hand, can be guaranteed, because you can choose to give up. Now, while success is not a choice, strength is. We choose to be weak or to be strong. We choose to be focused or to goof off. We choose to put things off or to finish what we start. Choose strength. Good day, and be one. I'd like to take a moment to mention some of our contributors: Antoinette Bird, Eric Boykin, Deborah Gallman, Wayne Baker, and Nyan Pharmacy. Salute to them and thank you to everyone for listening, liking, and sharing this message. Black empowerment only exists because of you.